So I know that you're backing Rishi Sunak. We want to talk to you about that. But I wonder what you make of the policies put forward by Liz Truss so far, in particular her tax cut plans. What would you make of those?
Well, I'm not here to defend or to stand up for Liz Truss. I'm Rishi Sunak's supporter, and he's set out a very clear set of proposals that deal with inflation, which is the major threat facing the UK economy and globally. I think there's alignment between both of them over the desire to have tax cuts. But for Rishi, this has to be on the back of growth, so that we can continue to support public services, and then we will be able to move forward with tax cuts. And obviously Liz has a different prospectus, and that's now what we will take out to the members in the country in the United Kingdom.
Yes, well, with that in mind, I thought you might like to give us your thoughts on what she is proposing. I know that you're backing Rishi Sunak, but, I mean, Citi, for example, has said that her policies would be the greatest risk to the UK because of the tax cuts, what they would do to inflation, and because of institutional disruption. Do you agree with that?
Well, what I know as the City Minister for the last 4.5 years is that the City look at these proposals very carefully, and they value stability, they value sound public finances, they recognise that the inflationary pressure is corrosive to the economy as a whole, and I hope they will see that Rishi Sunak has a plan to deal with that and a plan to deal with growth. Now, it will be for Liz to set out how she's going to deal with some of those concerns that I know have been raised by senior figures in the City. But my job is to actually bring as much scrutiny of the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak's proposals, and actually recognise that over the last 3 years, whilst he's been dealing with very grave difficulties facing the world economy and the UK economy, he's taken those tough decisions, and I think he's well equipped to take the country forward.
John, we also heard last night, as well as from the Bank of England governor, we heard from the current Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi, and he was talking about the possibility of introducing call-in powers over the Bank of England. What do you think those kind of powers, do you think they're necessary? And if we get them, what does that mean for Bank of England independence?
Well, I was very involved in actually signing off that bill before I left the building in the Treasury 2 weeks ago, when I resigned the day after Rishi Sunak resigned. The call-in power was always going to be an extremely rarely used instrument to force the regulators to look at something in extreme circumstances. Now, I imagine that's what's happened is that because there is no, we effectively have a caretaker Prime Minister at the moment, whilst this leadership election is going on, that the current Chancellor didn't feel comfortable taking that forward. But he also said last night that's something he's continuing to consider, and obviously whoever wins the leadership election, there will be a decision made early in September.
Could the call-in powers, hi John, it's Alex in New York, could those call-in powers be exercised in secret? Does it concern sort of independence of the BOE, if so?
Well, I'm not, no, it wouldn't threaten the BOE. That was never the intention. But obviously I'm not in government anymore, so it will be for my successors and the new Chancellor, if it is a new Chancellor, to make those decisions in due course. But I've always said that the Bank of England, the PRA and the Financial Conduct Authority in London do an excellent job, and their independence and as having strong regulators is absolutely instrumental to the success of the UK's financial services sector. And that's what I've championed whilst I was in office over the last 4.5 years.
John, I just want to take a little broad look. There has been strike after strike. It's really hot where you are. There are fires. We've seen a wage price spiral when it comes to NHS officials. We are seeing inflation at 40-plus year highs. Are we in a summer of discontent right now?
Well, it's for you to make commentary. It's for me to focus on the issues that are affecting the country. I acknowledge all of those things. These are tough times for the country and for the government. The inflation that we see is without precedent in the last 40 years. That's related a lot to the global energy supply. And obviously this very, very unusual period of weather is putting a lot of strain on public services across the board. It is a challenging time for public services and for the government. absolutely.
Do you think climate has been sort of missing in action on the agenda, John, when it comes to this leadership battle? I know that many of the contestants, and including the final two, have committed to net zero, but it seemed to come with conditionality, certainly in the case of Liz Truss, as to whether that was going to damage economies and people's livelihoods.
Well, I think Rishi Sunak led the way at COP in terms of seeking to make London the first net zero aligned financial centre, with transition plans for companies that are listed on the London Stock Exchange. And he will continue to try and lead those sorts of conversations across the G7 and G20 should he be elected Prime Minister in 6-7 weeks' time. I'm aware that the other candidate has a slightly different view, and obviously I'm sure her team will be happy to justify that. But from my point of view, this is a critical issue that and green finance was in my area of responsibility in government, is something we've got to take seriously.
So just circling back on the call-in powers, because this is something that has led to a lot of words being written this morning, as you can imagine, in the City of London. You described this as something, and you were there at the Treasury when this was being crafted, to be used in very rare situations, to force regulators to look at something. I mean, are we suggesting here that we could see a government call in a Bank of England governor and lean on them on interest rates, or would we never get to that point?
That's not how it was envisaged. It was envisaged as an absolute backstop, an emergency option to avoid a government having to do primary legislation. As I say, the issue now is that I'm not in power, I'm not taking the bill through Parliament, so I'm not in a position to verify the intentions of the government. I suggest that you speak to somebody who's in the government who can tell you what the government's position was. But from my perspective, when I left office, it was never envisaged to compromise the independence of the Bank of England, which is just fundamental to our system in the UK.